Tunde sat in a luxurious restaurant, staring at his drink with frustration. Across from him, Michael, Miriam's boss, leaned back in his chair with a smirk. Michael asked, "So let me get this straight. Miriam left you because of some madman?" Tunde clenched his jaw, his voice low and bitter. "Just like that? After all I've done for her and her miserable family." Michael chuckled, swirling his glass. "That's tough, bro. But I don't see why she should still be working at my company if she's no longer with you. Maybe, if she runs out of money, she'll have no choice but to crawl back to you." Tunde's lips curled into a sly smile. "Exactly what I was thinking. You should fire her." Michael nodded, raising his glass. "Consider it done. Tomorrow morning, she's gone." Tunde smiled, shaking Michael's hand. "Thanks, brother. You don't know how much this means to me." Michael laughed. "Don't mention it. I'll enjoy watching her suffer." The next morning, Mariam was at work when she was called into Michael's office. She walked in, confused but hopeful. "Good morning, sir." Michael didn't waste time. He handed her an envelope. "Mariam, we no longer need your services. This is your sack letter." Mariam's hands trembled as she took the envelope. "Sir, please. I need this job now more than ever. Please, sir." "I have been doing my work diligently." Michael leaned back in his chair, his expression cold. "That's not my concern. Leave my office before I call security to throw you out." Tears welled in Mariam's eyes, but she had no choice. She took the letter and walked out. When she reached outside, it was still raining heavily. She decided to wait under the office shade for the rain to stop. But within minutes, a security officer walked up to her. "Madame, you need to leave this building." Mariam turned to him in shock. "Please, I didn't bring my umbrella. I didn't know it would rain today. Let me stay here until it stops." The security guard shook his head firmly. "No, madame. I have a family to feed, and I don't want to lose my job. Please, leave now." Before she could plead further, he pushed her into the rain. Drenched and shivering, Mariam tried to stop a taxi, but no driver wanted to carry a wet passenger. With no other option, she walked home in the rain, crying. When she reached her small apartment, she collapsed on the couch, exhausted and heartbroken. "Oh God, why is life so unfair to me? What did I do to deserve this? First my fiancé, then my parents, now my job. Even my own boss humiliated me." She looked at the man sitting in the corner of the room, the Mad Prince. He stared at her silently, his eyes deep and unreadable. She forced a weak smile. Months passed, and things became even harder. She applied for jobs everywhere, but no one wanted to hire a pregnant woman. With no choice left, she started hawking water in the streets to afford daily meals. Meanwhile, in the royal palace, King Illumide had finally started to recover. Prince Io stormed into his father's chambers, frustration clear on his face. "Father, why have I not been crowned king to be yet?" The king, still weak, looked at him carefully. "Io, why are you in such a hurry to take your brother's position? You just lost your only brother and all you care about is the throne? Is this how I raised you?" Io clenched his fists. "Father, I don't understand. My brother is dead. He's been gone for months, yet you still act like he's coming back." The king shook his head. "I don't think I will let you rule this land if you don't know how to feel for others." His voice grew firm. "Leave my chambers at once." Avo left angrily, his face dark with rage. "No matter what I do, they will always prefer my brother over me, even in death." One evening, after Mariam had finished feeding the Mad Prince, she received a phone call from her landlord. "Hello, Mariam. You only paid for 6 months. It has now been over 7 months, and you still haven't paid the balance." Mariam quickly spoke. Sir, please, give me more time. I will pay soon. The landlord cut her off. I don't want excuses. If you don't pay by next week, you will have to leave. He ended the call before Miriam could say another word. She sank onto the floor, tears streaming down her face. Oh God, please do not forsake me. I have no one to run to. As she cried, the mad prince suddenly walked over to her. Without saying a word, he hugged her from behind and gently placed a beautiful bracelet on her wrist. Mariam was shocked. This is beautiful. Thank you. She touched his face, searching his eyes. But he suddenly let out a loud, piercing laugh and returned to his usual spot. Mariam sat there in confusion. Who exactly are you? And why do you act differently most times, like you are okay and can feel my pain? Back at Mariam's parents' house, Zainab had just returned from her NYSC camp. When she arrived, she was surprised not to find Mariam at home. Mama, Papa, where is Mariam? Her mother sighed deeply. We feel so bad, my daughter. She left the house months ago, and we have not been able to reach her since. Zainab's eyes widened in shock. What? What do you mean she left? Her father spoke. We did not support her leaving Tunde, and when she refused to go back to him, we told her to leave. Tears welled in Zainab's eyes. Mama, Papa, you made a huge mistake. Do you know how much I prayed for my sister to leave that monster called Tunde? Her parents looked down in guilt. Every time she came home from his house, she had bruises on her face, and now that she finally left him, you made life worse for her? She clenched her fists. Only God knows where she is now and how she's feeling. Zainab sat on her bed, dialing her sister's number with urgency. The phone rang for a few seconds before Mariam's tired but warm voice came through. Hello, sis, I'm back from NYSC, but I couldn't find you at home. Mom and Dad explained everything. Where are you staying now? I want to come and see you. Mariam smiled on the other end, feeling a mix of relief and guilt. It's okay, dear. I'll text you my address now. After ending the call, Mariam quickly typed out her location and sent it to Zainab. The next morning, Mariam heard a knock on the door. She rushed to open it and immediately embraced her younger sister, holding her tightly. Oh, Mariam, I've missed you so much. Mariam stepped back with a soft smile, but before she could say anything, Zainab's eyes widened in shock. Wait! Wow, sis, you're pregnant, and you didn't tell me all this while? Mariam lowered her gaze, rubbing her belly. I'm sorry, Zainab. I didn't want to disturb your NYSC with my problems. I know you too well. You would have called every day, worrying about me instead of focusing on your service. Zainab sighed and shook her head. You know me too well. She looked around the small apartment and then at the man sitting by the window, staring blankly at a corner. And how is he? Has he remembered anything yet? Mariam glanced at the mad prince, her expression softening. Not yet. Zainab's eyes fell on the sparkling bracelet on Mariam's wrist. Sis, where did you get this beautiful bracelet? Mariam chuckled. Funny enough, he gave it to me yesterday. Zainab gasped, looking back at the prince. He gave this to you? Wow, it looks like real diamond. Mariam shrugged. It has been in his pocket long time ago. I saw it there while washing his clothes. I doubt it's real, though. Zainab examined it closely. Sis, this looks very original to me. We should find out at the gold market. Mariam smiled, shaking her head. We'll see. Meanwhile, Mom and Dad are feeling bad for what they did to you. They regret sending you away. Zainab reached for Mariam's hand. And you've lost so much weight. How have you been coping? Mariam sighed. God is in control. Later that day, Mariam and Zainab went to the gold market to check if the bracelet was real. At the first shop, the jeweler inspected the bracelet carefully before looking up. "I will buy this for 3 million naira." Mariam and Zainab exchanged stunned looks. "Let's check another buyer." At the second shop, the jeweler looked at the bracelet and immediately offered 5 million. Mariam pulled Zainab aside and whispered, "This bracelet is worth much more than they are offering. I think they are pricing it lower because of how we are dressed." Zainab nodded in agreement. "Let's go home. Tomorrow we'll come back dressed differently." The next day, Mariam and Zainab returned to the gold market, this time dressed elegantly with makeup and wigs. As soon as they entered a high-end jewelry store, the jeweler examined the bracelet and immediately said, "I will pay 10 million naira." Mariam and Zainab kept their expressions calm, but internally they were shocked. "The price is too low. I want to sell it for 20 million. The jeweler hesitated before shaking his head. "The highest I can offer is 14 million naira." Mariam and Zainab visited other shops but got lower offers, so they returned and sold it for 14 million naira. As the money was transferred to Mariam's account, she and Zainab looked at each other, then at the mad prince sitting silently at home. Who was he really? And how did he get such an expensive bracelet? Mariam had no answers. The next day, Mariam and Zainab took the mad prince to the expensive hospital that the doctor had originally recommended. Mariam paid for all the treatment expenses, then called her landlord and paid rent for another year. Weeks passed, and one morning, Mariam received an urgent call from the hospital. She and Zainab rushed there, and as they entered, the doctor greeted them with a smile. "Good news! He has regained his sanity." Mariam's heart pounded as she stepped into the room. Prince Ademola was sitting up in bed. His once vacant eyes now filled with awareness. "Where am I? Doctor, how did I get here? Where is my mother, my father?" The doctor patted his shoulder. "Calm down. Someone very special brought you here." Just then, Mariam stepped forward. Prince Ademola looked at her, his expression shifting from confusion to familiarity. "I know this woman. I know you." Mariam's heart skipped a beat. The doctor smiled. "She is your wife. She brought you here." Ademola's eyes widened. "My wife?" He turned to Mariam, staring at her belly. "Is that pregnancy? For me?" Ademola looked at her, guilt filling his face. I can't remember anything. I'm sorry. I hope I didn't take advantage of you." Mariam shook her head, smiled softly, and sat next to him. "Yes, but you didn't hurt me, I promise. I should be the one apologizing for sleeping with you even in your condition. Let me explain everything." She narrated how she found him injured, how the men injected him and left him to die, and how she saved him. Ademo's eyes filled with tears. Before he could speak, Mariam suddenly gasped, clutching her belly. Zainab, I think the baby is coming," Zainab screamed. "Doctor, please help." The nurses rushed in and quickly wheeled Mariam into the labor room. Minutes later, a baby's cry filled the air. Mariam had given birth to a bouncing baby boy. Prince Ademola sat outside, still overwhelmed by everything. The night sky was dark, and the heavy rain poured over the grand palace. Lightning flashed, illuminating the courtyard, where dozens of white birds mysteriously gathered, circling above the palace roof. The guards whispered among themselves, startled by the rare sight. Inside the royal chambers, King Adiwale and Queen Moranike stood at the window, watching in shock. The queen gasped, gripping her husband's arm. "Queen Moranike." "Prince Iove." "Mom? Dad, what's going on? Why do you both look so shocked?" The queen turned to her son, her expression filled with fear and confusion. "Many years ago, on the night I gave birth to your brother, Prince Ademola, it rained exactly like this. and these same white birds appeared. It was the sign of a new heir to the throne. Prince Iove's face paled. "What are you saying? Are you suggesting my brother had a child before his death?" "King Adewale. But even if he did, it has been almost 12 months since his supposed death. A child should have been born months ago." The queen shook her head. "Something is not right. This is a sacred sign from the gods." The king turned to one of his royal guards. "Send for the chief priest immediately. We must consult the gods at once." The guard bowed and rushed out. Prince Eo felt his hands become clammy. Could it be that his brother was still alive? Inside the hospital, Prince Ademola sat on his bed, still processing his new reality. He had woken up just days ago, and now the world was shifting once again. The doctor knocked and entered, holding an envelope in his hand. "Mr. Ademola, I have something for you." Ademola frowned as the doctor handed him the envelope. "This is your DNA result. The lady who brought you here, your wife, just gave birth to a bouncing baby boy." Ademola's heart pounded. "Before you ask, I took the liberty of running a DNA test. The results confirm that you are the biological father of the child. Congratulations, Mr. Ademola." Ademola exhaled sharply, his hands trembling as he held the results. He was a father. Slowly, he stood and walked toward the labor room. His heart raced, emotions overwhelming him. When he stepped inside, he saw Mariam lying weak but smiling, cradling a tiny baby in her arms. Mariam lifted her head and met his eyes. Tears welled up in Ademola's eyes as he approached the bed. Gently, Mariam handed him the baby. He carefully took the newborn into his arms, staring in awe. The tiny boy blinked up at him, his small fingers curling around Ademola's thumb. Wow, I am really a father." He looked up at Mariam, his voice breaking. "Mariam, I don't even know where to begin." "Thank you. Thank you for everything you've done for me, for all you had to go through, for loving me unconditionally, even when I had nothing, even when I didn't know who I really was." Mariam smiled weakly, reaching for his hand. "Miriam, you don't need to thank me, Ademola. I only did what my heart told me to do. I loved you then, and I still love you now." Ademola bent his head, pressing a kiss to their son's forehead. Zainab, who had been watching the emotional moment, quietly stepped outside and pulled out her phone. She dialed their parents' number. After a few rings, her mother picked up. "Mama, Zainab, is everything okay?" "Mama, Papa, Miriam just gave birth, a bouncing baby boy." There was silence on the other end before their mother burst into tears. "Oh my God, my child, my grandchild. Papa, she had the baby? Oh, Zainab, please tell us where she is. We need to see her." Zainab took a deep breath. "If you are truly sorry for what you did to her, now is the time to prove it." Without hesitation, her parents agreed. Later that evening, Mariam's parents rushed into the hospital, their eyes filled with regret and longing. When they entered the room, Mariam looked up, holding her baby close. Her mother broke down in tears the moment she saw her daughter. She ran forward and gently picked up the baby, cradling him as if he were the most precious thing in the world. "Oh, my daughter, I am so sorry. Please forgive us. We should never have turned our backs on you." Mariam looked at her father, who had his head bowed in shame. "I failed you as a father, Mariam. Can you ever forgive me?" Mariam's eyes welled up, but she nodded. "I have already forgiven you, Papa. All that matters now is that we are a family again." Her father rushed forward, embracing both Mariam and the baby. "Zainab, see? I told you this baby would bring our family back together." Back at the palace, the chief priest arrived, his face grave as he stepped into the royal chamber. King Adewale urgently called you here because of the strange signs, the rain, the white birds. Tell us, what do they mean? The chief priest placed his staff on the ground and closed his eyes. He began to chant incantations, calling upon the gods for guidance. The room fell silent as they awaited his response. Moments later, the chief priest opened his eyes. He looked at the king and queen with deep concern. My king, my queen. The gods are still silent. The room grew tense. Prince Ao clenched his fists. Prince Ao muttered to himself, "What does this mean? Could my brothers still be alive?" The king and queen exchanged worried glances.